To make flesh costs flesh. To make life costs life. One of the greatest marvels of the human body is its ability to produce another human body, to bring another's existence into this world. What we rarely learn, however, is that in order to create new life, we must sacrifice a small piece of our own. The term semen retention shouldn't need to exist. It's the natural state of nearly every wild animal outside of their mating windows. The fact that we need a term for it, as if it is unnatural, shows just how degenerate modern society has become. The key to regeneration lies within your gonads, as they harness the sex energy, which is the same energy as your life force. Depletion of sex energy is depletion of life. The testes provide man with a major physiological advantage. The advantage is virility and sexual power, a well of energy he can channel into his physique, intellect, physical performance, and artistic ability. This benefit is granted only to the male organism. He is able to boost the development of these faculties beyond what nature would otherwise permit. However, the advantage comes with an equal disadvantage. The extra energy he diverts to the testes is drawn from his somatic cells, his bloods, his organs, his immune system. He extracts vitality from his body and redirects it into traits that make him more attractive to the opposite sex and help secure his progeny. The reason the testes allow men to boost these powers at the cost of survival is because they help secure him an optimal mate. Just as a peacock with beautiful feathers, a bird with a developed whistle, or a lion with a luxurious mane can use these traits to secure a mate, the testes offer man this powerful option to transform his raw life energy into the very traits that generate attraction. More simply put, man can make his candle burn brighter, but inevitably it will burn out faster. A woman, on the other hand, may not be able to channel this virile energy outward as man does, though because of this she develops deeper reserves of nutrition and life force within her being. Thus she appears more nourished and fully formed. In a biological sense, she is the more beautiful counterpart, as she cannot expend her sexual forces so easily. Nature demands this of her, as it is she who must carry new life within her body and nourish it after birth. Simply put, it is biologically more costly to be born a man than a woman, though you are given a powerhouse of virile energy to use at your disposal. It is much like giving a man and a woman $1 million. The man may spend $100 a day, the woman only $75, yet the first to run out must die. The internal secretion. The supply of this life force that furnishes man with his masculine traits is generated by the internal secretion, the fluid produced by the Leydig cells in the testes. It is this internal fluid that brings about the change from boyhood to manhood, the deepening of the voice, the broadening of the shoulders, the growth of facial hair, the increased density of bone and muscle, the surging of physical strength, and the activation of the sexual drive. There is of course an external secretion too, which is the sperm produced for ejaculation. In the case of the chronic masturbator, excess release of this external secretion deprives the body of the internal, and thus the sensualist misses out on many of the manly traits that the continent man receives. In the male of 16 or 18 years of age, who has lived and does live a pure life, whose sexual organism has just awakened to life, when this secretion of minute cells, the essential materials of the semen, reaches the vas deferentia, it is resorbed back into the blood, directed into the nerve channels of the system, and as a result, his voice is altered, becoming more full and deep. Hair begins to grow on his face. His figure is rounded out. His manner of thought and habit are altered, and he takes on a new life. Speaking of manhood, he says of this material that it is absorbed, and so endows him with the status of health, clearness of brain, a strength of purpose, and might of will that the poor, miserable sensualist, in the wildest flight of his diseased imagination, knows not of. In the continent man, the secretion takes place slowly, and is slowly reabsorbed, making the strong man grow in strength, and day by day so renewing life, that if all other of nature's laws are as faithfully obeyed, perfection of body and soul, as far as it is possible in this world, is realized. The sensualist. This internal secretion is essential to the formation of the man, and thus any activity that works to deplete it beyond natural circumstance becomes not only a burden on the system, but a pathway to degeneration of the organism. The sensualist is constantly engaging his sexual faculties, and based on the extent of his sensualism, stands to lose considerable amounts of this valuable substance. That is perhaps why the sensualist, over time, degenerates and takes on the appearance of a degenerate man, a man we may often refer to as a creep. Degeneracy that starts in thought soon works its way into the organism. The biological summer theory dictates that reproduction and in many cases gonadal activity have catabolic, deteriorative effects on the organism. Furthermore, it is well established in biology that testosterone is essentially immunosuppressive. That is why in organisms where testosterone production is ceased, the lifespan is extended. The habit of self-abuse is first a weakness. If continued long enough, it becomes a disease. Every time the male procures the expenditure of the semen, he drains his system of more vital energy than if he were to lose 2 ounces of the purest blood in his body. No wonder he becomes weak, emaciated, pale, sallow, with dark semicircles under his eyes, which have lost their brightness. No wonder he is weak and vacillating, hesitates, wavers, unable to decide, loses confidence in himself, and seeks to be alone, becomes gloomy, despondent, loses control of his feelings, so that tears flow unbidden at times without apparent cause. No wonder he feels degraded, for all the godlike faculties of his nature are being prostituted to this base absorbing passion, this mere brute impulse. Semen retention and regeneration. Those persons who are seeking the highest state of vitality possible to them, and who realize that all losses, whatever they may be and through whatever cause, must be avoided, there is for them a possibility of an ever-increasing vitality. They will insist on preserving every drop of their precious sperm, permitting it naturally to be reabsorbed, assuring them first of all of a perfect physical body, next increased mental faculties, and finally, if they progress, the higher nervous centers become nourished and developed, leading to the fullest spiritual development. When we speak of regeneration through sexual conservation, 2 mechanisms are occurring simultaneously. The first is simply conserving that which is not yet lost. When semen is retained, the body is spared the cost of replenishment, and less energy is drawn from the somatic cells. When we avoid sexual stimulation and the excess production of these secretions, the organism is spared the drain entirely. The second is active nourishment. The retained internal secretion is absorbed into the blood, where it circulates and feeds the body's tissues, nerves, and organs with the very substance that would otherwise have been expelled. One mechanism removes a drain, the other mechanism adds a supply. The major drain on the system through semen loss was often thought to be as a result of lecithin. Written in the 1950s. Since lecithin and phosphates are the chief constituents of the semen, which represents a concentrated solution of these nerve and brain foods, we can understand why seminal emissions are so depleting to the nervous system. When the sex glands withdraw more lecithin from the blood to replace expended secretions, there is less available to the brain. Continence and avoidance of sexual stimulation involving quiescence of the sex glands means better brain nutrition. Chakraborty notes that the constituents of the testicles, lecithin, have a stimulating effect on the central nervous system. This, he says, is due to the nucleoalbumins, lecithin and phosphorus, in which they, the testicles, are so rich, and which are also prominent constituents of nervous tissue. When the seminal secretions are conserved, they are resorbed by lymphatics and collected in the receptaculium chyli, a lymphatic receptacle in the pelvis, from where they ascend up through the thoracic duct, emptying into the left subclavian vein prior to its entrance to the heart. In this way, seminal secretions become part of the general circulation and are carried to nerve and brain tissue, as well as to all parts of the body, which they supply with lecithin and other internal cell foods present in the semen. Nature never formed the semen to be wasted in thoughtless indulgences. It is not an excretion like the urine to be voided, but an internal physiological substance, formative nerve and brain tissue, which should under all conditions be retained and not wasted. When it is wasted, the nerves, brain, and red blood cells suffer. Glandular, nervous, brain, and blood depletion follow sexual excess as a result of ensuing deficiency. If this is true, then the way to regeneration is to avoid sexual losses and thus maintain the lecithin concentration of the blood at the highest possible level. That is why most great geniuses as Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Leonardo da Vinci, Spinoza, Beethoven, Herbert Spencer, etc., led strictly continent lives. They retained their blood lecithin for the internal feeding of their brain, and did not waste it in the form of seminal discharges. On the other hand, among idiots and the insane, we find a low lecithin concentration in the blood and brain, due to overactive sex glands. If we consider these effects in the modern world, where the average man is depleting himself regularly of these vital substances, we would expect to see a general degeneration in aptitude, drive, and intelligence. Since the early 2010s, when the touchscreen phone entered mass circulation, the largest privately accessible library of pornography in human history has been placed at the fingertips of every man. Adult content he can access at any moment, in any place, of any variety. His opportunities for stimulation and expenditure have multiplied beyond anything in previous generations. During the 20th century, human IQ has steadily increased at a speed of roughly 3 points per decade. This phenomenon is known as the Flynn effect. However, since the 2000s, the effect has reversed, and for the first time, average IQ scores have begun to decline. That masturbation rates are surging and general aptitude is plummeting is no mere coincidence. This is in fact something that has been known since the days of the Bible, that the lust not only destroys the man, but destroys the society in which he lives. The 12th century military general Saladin wrote, "If you want to destroy any nation without war, make adultery or nudity common in the young generation." The elixir of youth. The famous French physiologist Charles-Édouard Brown-Séquard, known as the father of modern endocrinology, noticed that senility always came along with some degree of degeneration in the sex glands. From this, he developed his theory that replenishing the sexual fluids of these glands could reverse the degeneration of the organism, working, in effect, as an elixir of life to restore youth to the body. He undertook extremely controversial self-experiments in which he injected himself with the sexual secretions of animals and observed their effects. In one particular experiment, he injected himself with the testicular fluids of a dog and observed the following. Nervous activity has been increased in every way. Muscular strength has become much more considerable than in the past. The intestinal and vesical contractions have taken on a vigor which they had not for a long time. Ability to do intellectual work has greatly increased. I have discovered, following these injections, how one regains youth. It was later found, however, that these beneficial effects were only temporary, and further research found toxic effects associated with the injecting of sex hormones from animals that may cause death, and of this reason such therapies were rightfully abandoned. As Raymond Bernard writes of Sacard's work, he failed to realize that a hygienic, continent life would naturally reawaken man's own sex glands. The so-called brown Sacard elixir proved ineffective for this very reason. It could only produce a temporary invigoration, never a lasting one. Sacard had indeed stumbled upon the regenerative power of sex hormones, but delivering them through injection could never give the body a constant supply of vitality. The man who does not squander these internal secretions through lust, by contrast, keeps that supply running on its own, generated by his own body rather than injected into. In other words, the fountain of youth is already within you. To draw from it for the purpose of regeneration, we must learn not to spend it on sexual indulgence. Some of you will be born into this world seemingly incomplete in physicality and development. You may be seen as less attractive, less powerful, and simply less magnetic than some of your peers. Others will be born into this world in perfect or close to perfect form, full of energy, robust physicality, and attractiveness. The natural state of our own organism, whether it be well endowed or lacking in vital force, is a direct result of our ancestors' lives and the choices they made. We are all either paying for their mistakes or enjoying the fruits of their good habits, carried forward into this life. Our sexual energy can redeem us from the setbacks our organism has acquired since birth. Let us consider the story of the ugly duckling. The duckling is laughed at, taunted and neglected for his less than attractive appearance. The traits he was born with, yet in time grow to become the most beautiful swan of them all. A duckling is a boy, the swan is a man. What takes place here is obviously the process of puberty, the activation of the gonads to produce the internal secretion. And it is thanks to this power that a true transformation takes place within the duckling. When the internal secretion is conserved and left to carry out the organism's function without interference, man develops his masculine traits to the highest degree, making us into the ideal form of our gender. The secret of man's sex force, his creative principle, has long been known through history, and thus chastity and virginity have long been valued and exalted. In early life, if the element of sex be strong and wisely directed, it is rapidly utilized in the economy of nature, in the development of the boy or girl into well-rounded maturity. It is in reality the essence of life, and if retained in the organism, will give strength and power to every function, faculty, and sentiment. It rounds out the physical development, gives solidity and plumpness to the muscles, elasticity to the step, animation to the expression, vigor to the energies, keenness to the intellect, vivacity to the emotions, ardor to the affections, courage to the convictions, and individuality, independence and stability to the character. The potency of sex in the development and maintenance of physical strength, mental vigor, and moral courage can scarcely be appreciated in the present state of society. The almost universal dissipation of this element, in one way or another, in married life as well as in discreet youth, leaves no true standard by which to estimate the power of this element were it wholly directed to the normal functions of life. There are thousands, it is true, who do not intentionally misdirect this force, and as a result, if well endowed by hereditary, they become kings and queens in society. Specimens of true manhood and womanhood, but even these are not what they might have been had their ancestors acted as wisely. Resurrect your younger self. If you have been spending years releasing your sexual energies, can you reverse the damage done? A man who excessively indulges his sex function is draining the forces of life from his body and thus accelerating his own degeneration. The effect of this, when observed by others, is generally a lack of magnetism, a deterioration of looks, and often a feeling of repulsion towards the excessive individual. This depletion does not go unnoticed. The mind tends to group negative traits together, so that if a man is expressing a few, his companion may subconsciously assign him many more. This is why in a job interview we must be very careful of hygiene and presentation, because they hint at deeper aspects regarding the man in question. An employer may link an unkempt appearance with lack of discipline, laziness, or other undesirable traits. If your life requires you to mix with many people, you must become very conscious of your own private habits and how they communicate themselves to those around you, often without your own awareness of it even happening. An excessive sexual habit tends to strip a man of his good character, his pure qualities, his noble traits. That goodness we feel when talking to a pure person is dissipated in the man who opens himself up to immoral fancy. There is no way around this. If you continue to indulge in sexual fantasy and progress down the road of immorality, you will become this very person, and all those around you will feel it and feel an aversion to you. There is no wall between your private habits and your public life. Those habits will always come to light. Writers of the past not only believed it ruins a man's morals, they believed it ruins the entire organism. Written over a century before. The individual who leads a licentious life does, in part or in whole, weaken his nervous system, and through that the digestive system is disorganized. The stomach, liver, kidneys, etc. are diseased, and dyspepsia, rheumatism, apoplexy, paralysis, and a score of other diseases assert their sway. Weaken his lungs, and consumption appears. Disable his special senses. His sight, hearing, and taste are affected. Disorganize his brain tissue. Memory is weakened. Perceptive and reflective power is weakened, as seen in imbecility of plan and purpose, and indecision of thought and action. The moral sentiments are debased, the soul blighted, and love, religion, and God cannot dwell within him. Arrests his growth and brings on premature old age. Destroys his manhood, and the offspring propagated by him are sickly, scrofulous, deformed, and die prematurely, and is, all in all, a blot and stain upon God's beautiful earth, a failure in this life and in the next. During the 18th and 19th century, the idea that excessive sexual indulgence was bad was very established among many doctors and physiologists. In fact, this idea that sex deteriorates the organism stretches back to ancient Greece, and perhaps even earlier. Today's accepted narrative is that masturbation and sexual indulgence are harmless or carry negligible effects on the body. But even such sentiments may contradict modern biology. We know that sex is a catabolic process. We know that gonadal stimulation is often highly costly on the organism, and we know animals that avoid these processes live longer. If your appearance is aging faster than your years, and you are looking older than you should be, then I believe excessive sexual indulgence to be the central cause. I also believe chaste living and semen retention to be the remedy. One thing we become aware of as we age is that our own speed of aging is very different from the next person. Some people retain their childhood look, their baby face, perhaps more facial fat, whereas others transform quicker to a more adult or aged appearance. Their cheeks may sink, their hairline recedes, perhaps their bone structure recesses. The most telling sign, however, which is often missed by the person observing themselves, is the energy in their eyes. This is because the eyes transmit very important information to do with the state of the brain and organism as a whole. These aging changes, however, manifest not only in the facial features themselves, but also in the expressions those features are capable of making, and in how harmoniously they sit together on the face. We can often see when someone is impure in thought by the way in which their features are expressed, just as we can often see a pure soul by the appearance of his face alone. The benefits of chastity arise because one need not pay the expensive cost of reproduction and all that it entails. Let's explore the advantages a chaste life gives with this description from over a century before. The individual who leads a life of chastity, a strictly continent life. The nervous system is invigorated and strengthened. The special senses, the sight, hearing, etc. are strong, delicate and acute. The digestive system is kept normal, and the man knows not what a sick day is. The growth of body is filled up and rounded out, and a full measure of years may come, but old age never. For the last days, in their pleasurable enjoyment of good health and a sound mind, are as were the days of his childhood. The brain is enlarged and perfected. Memory grows strong. The perceptive and reflective faculties increase in power, as shown in the ability to originate and execute the calm, self-possessed strength to endure, and gentleness, courage, generosity, and nobleness of character. The moral sentiments are elevated. Love grows and ripens, and the soul, in its exercise, reaches up and commingles with the Spirit of God. The reproductive element is preserved in all its life-renewing and life-giving power until full ripeness of years. This is in part the difference between a life of licentiousness or semi-continence and a life of strict confidence. Which will ye choose? That God intended the reproductive element in mankind to be used only as a means to propagate the species, no clear-minded, right-thinking man can deny. And when used with any other object, it is a waste of one of the finest and most subtle essences of the soul's interior presence. Without this substance inside of us, we are missing the substance of life, some call presence of God or the divine. Without this sexual element, we lack the qualities of abundant life. The man that conserves this energy can always be recognized by others. Sometimes we cannot articulate what exactly it is about the person, but we sense some energy, some life force within them. It makes them inherently attractive to us. We may say he is charming, he is enigmatic, he is magnetic, and so on. Written in the 1800s. The sex attribute produces a magnetism peculiar to itself that is highly potential in its influence over the mentality. It supplies to the whole organism what the batteries supply to the telephone or telegraph wire. As a charged wire is a much better conductor of force or vibratory waves than an uncharged, so the person whose sex nature is strong and normally active is always magnetic. Every feeling, emotion, and sentiment has a certain vivacious thrill that is never found in the poorly sexed or in those whose powers have been weakened. That subtle power called personal magnetism, which enables the reader, singer, actor, or public speaker to captivate and hold, to sway and control an audience, is largely a product of the sex element. Those who are strongly endowed with this attribute put an expression into their work and exert an influence over an audience that those who lack it never can. Their own great creative power enables them to create thoughts, feelings, and emotions in others. There is a peculiar thrill to the voice of the singer, a burning pathos in the expression of the orator that is well sexed, that cannot be duplicated by any amount of elocutionary training. Persons vary greatly in the strength of their personal magnetism. Some men and women are so poorly sexed that they seem utterly wanting in magnetic power. They neither attract nor are attracted. They may be highly cultured, good-looking, moral, and otherwise endowed with many excellent qualities, yet they are not popular with the opposite sex, and the world wonders why. It is one of those mysteries wherein nature proclaims her wisdom by denying the power of attraction to those who are not well qualified for marriage or parentage. Observation proves that such persons are not very companionable, are seldom happy in marriage life, and never parent well-born children. Others who are very strongly endowed with the sex attribute are highly attractive and are frequently attracted to a great variety of persons. They seem to have a very wide range of adaptability. A lady so constituted will be the choice of 20 men, no two of whom have similar likes or tastes in other matters, and yet each will insist that she forms his perfect counterpart. Strongly masculine men are always favorites among the ladies, even though they may be homely, awkward, illiterate, and even dissipated. They are chosen in preference to those who are highly superior in other ways, but wanting in this all-essential element. Brain generation. Both the brain and the testes are perhaps two of the most energetically demanding organs in the human body. They are more alike than any other two organs, sharing closely related proteins and a high degree of overlap in gene expression. Our system must provide nutrition not only to these two massive energy drains, but to all other tissues as well. When one part of the body receives an excess of nutrition, then it is logical that another will become deficient. We often see this in plant biology, when two plants are planted in the same pot, and one thrives whilst the other withers away. When we are constantly stimulating the genitals, we are continually sending our bloods, that is, our life substance, to the genital area and thus away from the other parts. I believe it is quite reasonable to assume that those who excessively engage the lower passions reduce the available energy for higher cerebral activity. This antagonism between the two organs has long been recognized by physiologists and writers alike. The brain and the sexual organs are the great rivals in using up bodily energy, and there is an antagonism between brain vigor and extreme sexual vigor, even though they may sometimes appear at different periods in the same individual. In this sense, there is no paradox in the saying of Roman Coria that potency is impotency, and impotency potency, for a high degree of energy, whether in athletics or in intellect, is unfavorable to the display of energy in other directions. The masters of all the more intensely emotional arts have frequently cultivated a high degree of chastity. This is notably the case as regards music. One thinks of Mozart, of Beethoven, of Schubert. At the age of 25, when he had already produced much fine work, Mozart wrote in a letter that he had never touched a woman. Dr. Ryan expressed a similar thought when he wrote, Bacon observed that no one of great genius in antiquity had been addicts to women, and he stated that among the moderns the illustrious Newton had never enjoyed sexual intercourse. This fact confirms the remark made by Areteus, and since verified by physiologists, that continence, or the reabsorption of the semen into the bodily economy, impresses the whole organism with an extreme tension and vigor, exciting the brain and exalting the faculty of thought. Though we speak of regeneration of the brain, first we must consider how to seal the leaks of energy being drained away from the mind. Chastity is of course the answer, as when we become pure in thought, we put a halt to any fantasies that stimulate the testes and start diverting blood towards the testes and away from the brain and other functions of the body. The man who is degenerate in thought is very likely depriving his mind of the needed blood and life force to function optimally. It was often said in old times that masturbation makes you insane. And although this is not an accepted belief in today's world, it has not been proved wrong specifically. In fact, much evidence points towards a very real connection between the brain and the genitals, and perhaps masturbation and mental conditions. While inactivity of the sex glands means less withdrawal of lecithin from the blood and better nutrition of the brain and nerves, overactivity of the sex glands means that more lecithin is withdrawn from the blood to replace expended secretions. This means that less is available to the nerves and brain. In his Masturbatic Insanity, Dr. Spitzka presents a study of 12 cases of insanity, all of which he attributes to masturbation. He claims that the occurrence of psychosis as the result of masturbation is primarily due to arrested brain nutrition. This results from the withdrawal from the circulation of brain-nourishing lecithin and other phosphorus compounds through excessive seminal discharges. For we must remember that lecithin is a chief constituent of the myelin sheaths of the nerve cells and essential for their activity, during which it is consumed. For it is the nerve oil that keeps the fire of nerve and brain activity burning. Since lecithin is also a principal constituent of the semen, we can readily understand why excessive sexual activity should lead to lecithin deficiency and undernutrition of the nerve and brain cells. If this idea is correct that excessive sexual activity is a massive drain on our cerebral systems, then it stands to reason that calming down the gonads and halting the constant production of sexual fluids should be beneficial to the brain, or maybe even regenerative. There are currently no human studies that have directly looked at this specific link, but we do have animal data. In a 1949 study on rats, researchers found that completely halting testicular secretions boosted the oxygen intake of the brain by 32%. With more oxygen in the brain, the mind is able to generate more cellular energy. Continence results in a greater supply of lecithin, cholesterol, and phosphates in the blood, and consequently in the brain. Brown-Séquard has shown that testicular secretions increase nerve and brain vitality. Chakraborty remarks that the eating of desiccated testicles has a stimulating effect on the central nervous system, due to the nuclear albumins, lecithin, and phosphorus in which they are so rich, and which are also prominent constituents of nervous tissues. However, there is no need to eat desiccated testicles when each individual can conserve and resorb the valuable secretions of his own. Climatic influence. It has long been a common belief that people from warmer climates are more passionate and sexual than those from the colder regions. Heat tends to excite the passions, which I believe is why we find that in the hotter regions the passions are higher. When the passions are higher, more of the secondary sexual traits develop. In women, their periods begin earlier due to this heat. In men too, puberty often commences earlier in hotter climates that are closer to the equator. Of course, this may develop the secondary sexual characteristics further and perhaps explain why the hotter countries are often known for the more sexually attractive individuals. If we think in terms of Europe, the southern regions, Spain, Italy, and Greece, are famous for their sexually attractive people. perhaps more so than the northern regions. That is not to say that the northern regions are unattractive. Nordic beauty is very famous, for example, though I would argue that this is not a sensual beauty like the southern regions. Consider these stereotypes: the spicy Latina, the hot-blooded Italian, or the hot-blooded Spaniard. Spain, Italy, and Greece, for that matter, are located in the most southern parts of Europe. The Latina is from the south of America. Regions where the climate is hotter. It is this hot climate that accentuates the hot personality, the passions, the sensual traits. There is also the common saying in many countries that those from the south are warmer in personality and more generous, whereas those from colder regions are more reserved and introverted. In America, they often say that LA is friendlier than New York. The term Southern hospitality exists to express those of the warmer climate being warmer in character, more welcoming, and more generous. It has been written before that those who grow up in tropical climates tend to sexually mature at a younger age due to the hotter weather. Tropical fruits too generally flower and fruit earlier than fruits of temperate regions. It is also often said that the birth rates are higher in the hotter regions, and perhaps this is in part due to the heightened passions one feels living in such a climate. You may be more aware of this connection to heat and sexuality than you consciously realize. When we say someone looks exotic, it usually means their physical traits are from a hotter climate, a tropical climate, and that word exotic is very much connected to physical attraction and sexuality. What I'm getting at here is that for those in hotter areas, they may experience stronger passions and struggle more to keep their passions in check. And as many of the older writings have argued, an excess of sexual activity comes at the cost of brain activity. Because the brain and testes are two of the body's most energy-demanding resources, the overactivity of one may come at the cost of the other. You may notice that this too is seen around the world. The colder regions have generally become more prosperous and industrious, whereas the tropical regions remain less so. There are a few exceptions, of course, such as Australia and Saudi Arabia, though perhaps other factors such as natural resources help explain these deviations. Northern European countries such as Germany, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark have over the centuries developed into highly organized, functioning nations. To live in these less hospitable regions demands greater exertion of the brain in order to survive. Their produce window is low, so they must learn how to make the most productive use of limited resources, to plan, to store, to build systems that ensure survival through long periods when the land gives nothing. I suspect the climatic coolness likely keeps the passions at bay, and as the winter is more inhospitable, the body remains in a state of survival mode. Harsh climatic conditions tend to foster strong resilience, and when the body is in this state or mode of survival, the sexual impulse is given less priority. We see this in the case of animals in the wild versus domesticated animals. As the wild animals are more at risk of danger, their sexual instinct remains low outside of their mating windows. Domestic animals are more likely to engage in frequent sexual activity and, in some cases, masturbation. Julius Caesar interestingly spoke of the connection between the German people's physical powers and chastity, saying, "Their whole life is occupied in hunting and in the pursuits of the military art. From childhood they devote themselves to fatigue and hardships. Those who have remained chaste for the longest time receive the greatest commendation among their people. They think that by this the growth is promoted. By this the physical powers are increased and the sinews are strengthened. And to have had knowledge of a woman before the 20th year they reckon among the most disgraceful acts." The southern regions of Europe, such as Italy, Greece, and Spain, are widely recognized for their passionate spirit and warmth. The general attitude, from what I have heard, is more relaxed perhaps than the northern regions. They're also known for their beauty and their strong romantic affections towards the opposite sex. The hot or cold environment in which you live has a real influence over the characteristics and traits you develop. It influences your tendencies towards the sexual or towards the cerebral. This in no way is to say that a sexual man is stupid or that a cerebral man is impotent. It's a more subtle distinction, though your choice of where you direct your energies will also shape what kind of person you become and what faculties you develop. Our language reveals this connection between temperature and sexuality in many ways. When an animal is feeling sexual, we say it is on heat. When a woman is particularly attractive, we say she is hot. It is also often said that a cold shower causes a man's genital size to shrink. A person without passion is often described of as cold. You should be able to recognize this already on some level in your life. Usually winter is a more productive time for work, particularly thought work, as it is easier to concentrate in a cooler environment. Perhaps that is even why major school holidays are allocated to summer, the hottest period of the year, as cerebral work becomes more difficult and draining during this time. This notion of the hotter climate inducing the passions is extremely relevant to the man retaining his sexual energies. A man living in a hotter climate may perhaps need to exercise an even greater restraint than the man living under more temperate conditions. When a man's sexual impulse is restrained, it brings out certain powers within the man. Written 150 years before. The act of generation being, for the most part, associated with the idea of a brutish and purely animal function which appears to degrade our nature and lower us to the level of the brutes. This effort of continence and virtue, which manifests the empire of the mind over the body, is always admired by man, because it seems to announce a superior nature and a sublimity of character which approaches him, in some degree, to the divinity. Chastity, by preserving the vigor of the vital powers, and by returning into all the organs that superabundance of life which is concentrated in the genital parts, must necessarily increase the energy of all our functions. With literary persons, indeed the encephalon, or brain, frequently absorbs all the activity at the genital organs, which are often prematurely emaciated and withered. From what has been advanced, it will be easily understood that in proportion as the morals of a nation become more depraved, the fewer it produces of celebrated characters. Corporeal strength follows the same law as mental vigor. Thus the athletes lived in celibacy in order to preserve their strength. Heat can easily move man into the mode of lustful inclination. For those who reside in a hot climate, preventative measures will be most helpful. The best way to cool the passions is by cold water, the cold bath or the cold shower. Bathing in a tub of cold water or washing the body, in particular the genitals, for an extended period with room temperature or cold water. This has been recommended in many of the books of old as a method for dampening the sexual passions, and in my own experience, it has proven to be very effective. Once the passions are dampened, a refreshing feeling comes over the body, and the brain feels invigorated. After a cold bath, I always find study and thought work to be most enjoyable. Of course, if you have heart issues or such, perhaps the shock of cold water is not recommended. If you find the groin area to be particularly overheated, then it is also worth considering the materials you are wearing. Cotton underwear tends to breathe better and prevent overheating. The polyester stretchy type briefs seem to keep in the heat and raise the temperature, which can also create more odor. I recommend cotton briefs to avoid overheating and thus reducing lustful feeling. The climate and heat we experience has a very profound effect on the body and character. Be aware that when the body is heated, the passions are more likely to be excited, and as a result, semen is more likely to be produced and lost. This is not to say that you must live in a cold or hot place. There are positives and negatives for both modes of life. In fact, tropical regions do have many benefits related to health and longevity. Next time you find yourself in a state of overstimulation, consider your body temperature, and if it is high, make efforts to lower it slightly through cool water, less clothing, air conditioning, etc., and see how the lowering of heat reduces the sexual passions. If you're in the heat of the moment, keep yourself cool. The alchemists of the flesh. Long before physiologists mapped out the human body, ancient mystics understood this exact system through the language of symbol and myth. By the transmutation of metals, the alchemists meant the conversion of man from a lower to a higher order of existence, from a natural to a spiritual life. The making of gold was undoubtedly the compelling motive of those alchemists who were experimenters in primitive chemistry. But the true alchemists have nothing to do with solutions, putrefacitions, coagulations, or anything of the kind. They were as far from attempting to produce material gold bricks as Freemasons are from building with common bricks and mortar. What they wanted was to obtain the pure gold of wisdom from the inferior metals represented by man's animal passions. In Hermetic writings, there occur repeatedly such phrases as, "Our gold is not in any way the gold of the multitude, but it is the living gold. It is the gold with which the wise are enriched, not that which is coined. All beings contain in their inmost center a precious grain of this gold. One must take this pure spiritual gold. Those who labor with dead materials will obtain nothing that lives." The philosophical alchemists used only symbolically the chemist's utensils and vernacular in expounding the truth, giving the holy thing to those who think only of indulging their lustful desires. They taught that alchemy casts off the sensual man, because sensuality suffocates its germ. To the sensualist, you are like an onion stripping layers off your own existence, until all that remains is a tiny bulb. Sperm production is a process of separating a small part of your soul from your body in order to breathe new life into the world. It is a sacrificial act, the most sacred and most important process in the universe. The preservation of semen was known by the ancients as the elixir of youth. It was said that to have any power in this world, you must first have power over yourself. The elevation of man's consciousness is contingent on the subjugation of his passions. You must learn the workings of your own soul in order to affect the universe outside of you. And it was in Apollo's temple that the ancients carved their most important secret, know thyself. The secrets of creation come from within. The secrets of the universe are within man. To know the universe, you must first know yourself. And looking east, we find this esoteric knowledge is very much in line with the old traditions. Among the first alchemists in recorded history were the Chinese Taoists. Over 2,000 years ago, they practiced what was called Huangjin Bunao, returning the seminal essence to nourish the brain. They believed that when the seminal essence was conserved, it was reabsorbed into the body, strengthening the man and elevating him spiritually. They wrote that this practice extended man's longevity, and some even went as far as to claim it as the key to immortality. Written in the 3rd century, when Jing is emitted, the whole body feels weary. One suffers buzzing in the ears and drowsiness in the eyes. The throat is parched and the joints heavy. Although there is brief pleasure, in the end there is discomfort. Further elaborated in the 8th century, the Jing being elevated against the current, both the man and the woman can become immortals and obtain the Tao. Thus all the old Taoist traditions say that if the semen is ejaculated, it leads to other men, that is to say, a child is born. But if it is retained, it leads to the man himself, that is to say, an immortal body is born. That is the meaning of it. According to these historical texts, ordinary continence is not sufficient to bring about regeneration and rejuvenation. One may avoid all sexual acts and all voluntary sexual losses, and yet lose sex hormones and lecithin through nocturnal emissions, which are just as harmful. As the researcher Steinach later suggested, for true rejuvenation to result, continence must be total. There must be no voluntary or involuntary seminal losses of any kind. In the case of woman, she must avoid all loss of mucus or blood from the genital organs, thereby conserving valuable hormones, lecithin, and other vital substances thus lost. Do not take for granted the gifts you have been given in this life. Most men do not realize these gifts. They are unable to connect deeply with their own source of divinity because they are lost in a sea of sensuous thoughts. Yet you have within you the knowledge to make use of these gifts, to expand your consciousness and the consciousness of others around you. When humanity moves into the higher state, there will be no murder, theft, violence, or any other acts that come from selfish desire and sin. All of the evil in this world stems from sensual desire. The retainer is thus the alchemist, the magician, as he transmutes all these desires into creative force, and with this force he can move mountains. He can leave a great imprint on humanity through his efforts. He has become a conduit for the divine force. He has allowed God to carry out his work through him. This is the destiny of a chaste man. Good luck.